Japan's Achilles heel. Now with Germany defeated, the United States was able to concentrate all its resources to the Pacific. As more and more US victories occurred, Japan began to resort to a defensive attrition war, destroying oil refineries such as the one in Balikpapan. Even in the midst of World War II, before the German surrender, the Japanese were doing the same. However, Yergin asks a vital question, quote, "How are American forces to be supplied?" End quote. This feat was tested at the decisive Battle of Midway Island. As Yergin put it, quote, "The aura of invincibility that surrounded the Japanese army had been pierced. But it was only one small and costly step in the long struggle to exhaust the resources, if not the will of an implacable enemy." End quote. Ultimately, Japanese forces lost at Midway. Although oil fields in the East Indies were destroyed in this war of attrition, Japan benefited from one American mistake. Before the war, Caltex, an American oil industry, drilled a discovery well and sold an abundant amount of oil to Japan. This discovery well was found in California. Premier Tojo thought all his problems were over, however, he had spoken too soon. In realizing that oil would become an eventual problem, the Japanese looked to their southern zones and began a Pacific Wall. This Battle of the Maris was the attrition war of important oil fields in the southern territories of Japan. During the battle, Japan had lost 86% of its shipping, crippling its oil income by 1943. According to Yergin, quote, "A year later, in the comparable quarter of 1944, the imports of oil were less than half the 1943 figure." End quote. By 1943, the Japanese fleet was virtually non-existent. There were no ships to fuel, and no fuel for ships, if they even existed. The same went for planes. Pilot training by 1944 was decreased to 30 hours, half of what was needed. Even in the Philippines, the lack of fuel kept remaining ships stranded. After both Midway and the Philippines, Japan was crushed. US forces, with the help of industrial might, surrounded the Japanese mainland, beginning at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. Evidently enough, as we can see from several theaters of war, oil is simply important.